did you learn English?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, it's a long history. Yeah. How did I learn English? I can tell you, I was learning English formally for about 12 years, right? And I started, I think I was in the second grade when I had my first English lesson. So I had English lessons basically almost every day when I was at school. When I also, when I graduated and I went to university, I had English maybe for 3 years, also extensively, like not every day, but maybe almost every day. But I mean, I can tell you what was my English level at that time after finishing those 12 years of English. I could understand a few nouns, yes, like for example, like dog, cat, to do, to play, like to eat, yeah? Like tasty food. Okay, yeah, I can understand, but that's about it.
And how about communication? After those 12 years, how well did you communicate?
I can tell you that in all these 12 years, I've seen maybe 1 or 2 foreigners live. Like, for example, I never had a chance to talk to foreigners. I just saw them like sometimes, like on occasion. But otherwise, there was absolutely no no practice, no way to actually communicate. And more importantly, at that time, there was no YouTube or anything like that, you know, Facebook. Because if I had Facebook at that time, maybe I could find some live communication options, but I mean, I had nothing. There was no internet. There was only a library. The only option.
And cable TV, right?
Yeah, cable TV was on. Yeah, and I remember actually, I had cable TV, and it was free. And sometimes, so the way it was working like this. In the night time, in the evening, they had some movies, and of course, those movies were pirated movies. I mean, no one paid for license or anything. They just put that movie on. But before the movie starts, so basically there was no audience at that time because people didn't watch it, and there was what is it called, Sky Channel or something like that. It was from England, from Britain. And I was kind of like often I was listening to it on the background, and it was all in English. And maybe now I wouldn't even pay attention to it because basically there was nothing to watch. but at that time it was kind of like I mean, it felt fresh, like kind of, oh yeah, that they're speaking English, and I can understand a few words, but not more than that. So it was a little bit of help, maybe to some extent, but very little.
And how was your first experience using the English in the real life situation?
Yeah. So basically, what happened is I started working full time, and of course there was no English in my work, or there was no English around me. But I decided to actually go overseas. I decided to do my MBA, so I was looking at some options, and obviously I had to take IELTS. So that's the first thing that I realized. And then I started to get some information. At that time, I connected to the internet finally, so internet was available. And basically, I just tried to compare my current level of English versus what they are asking for in the IELTS. And obviously it was like not even nothing like that. So basically I had very little options at that time. I mean, I started to do self-learning, obviously, because I started to just utilize internet. And mostly I was just talking to myself. I had a couple of English teachers, maybe those English teachers that I actually teach in English by the book. And I quickly gave up because basically it doesn't help, it doesn't work, and it never worked. I had another person basically helping me. She was able to speak English, and it was almost unique actually. I mean, in my hometown at that moment, it was really difficult to find the person who could speak at least a little bit of English, and that helped me a lot actually. I mean, basically it was an English lesson, but it was actually English lesson. I mean, using English lesson, and it was only once a week. Only once a week for 1 hour, I had a chance to do that. And obviously, if I would do that only in the lesson, I would never get anywhere because I had to do it basically all the time, every day. And maybe to some extent, if I had that modern technology in the beginning of 2000, 2001, 2002, of course, I had very limited options. My internet was dial-up internet. I didn't have smartphone or mobile or anything like that. So that could help me. I mean, I could get there faster, obviously, if I had those technologies. But I didn't have any, and that's why I had to basically talk to myself. That was the best I could do.
And when you finally got, then you took the IELTS, right? And you went to get your MBA abroad.
Yeah. So I took IELTS in Moscow in 2002, and surprisingly, I got a good score, especially for speaking. I actually didn't expect to get 8 for speaking. I felt I felt I just I failed it because I didn't feel confident. But it was okay. So I took IELTS only once, and it was enough to apply for university. Basically, I went. But I would say, of course, when I arrived in New Zealand, my English wasn't that good. It was about high intermediate, I think. So I think I started with high intermediate in New Zealand, and little by little started to improve it towards advanced, and maybe.
So when you got there in New Zealand, like, how was your English talking to?
It was okay. Basically, it was okay to get by, but I think most native speakers didn't understand what I was saying. And at first I was thinking it's something wrong with my accent, obviously, or like I don't have enough vocabulary. But when I realized that it's case-on-case basis, some people actually understand what I'm saying because they're listening. Some people are not listening, so they won't be able to understand things. It was, I would say it was high intermediate. It wasn't advanced. It was like a little bit less than advanced. But of course, every day you start using it every day, and you obviously start improving, getting better.
So the idea is tips. So what tips do you give to the person that is desperate to learn English because they have a pressure from their job?
Right.
They don't feel that they reply to some emails, they don't feel it's enough. They actually even shake on their boots when they hear that they're gonna have to use English in the near future. So what tip would you give to that person?
Yeah. Actually, it's a good question because I have 2 answers to this question. Like the first answer would come from me. If you ask me in 2002, 2003, when I was actively studying English, I would give you a different type of advice. So let me start with first one. So if you ask me that question nearly 15 years ago, I would say, you need to actually study English. You actually need to learn the rules. You need to somehow
I think that we lost connection for a while, so I'm gonna ask again. But then we had it right. Like we're not gonna leave it, entirely, right?
Sure.
So, and what tip would you give to that, person in that situation?
Yeah. So basically, again, if you ask me many years ago, right? So my answer would be you need to learn phrases. Like you need to really learn phrases. You need to actually. Sometimes you just need to recite those phrases, like because you have no one to talk to, so you actually start reciting it, and maybe you get better. And I think it works. But right now, I would give you a little bit different advice, just based on my experience, because now I'm using English for so many years, basically, and I can give you a different type of advice. I would say that basically, you need to stop studying it first thing you need to do is just basically whatever you do now, studying it, you just need to stop doing. It's seriously. I mean, like the only way for us to get fluent is just to start using that language, whether it's English or any other language, in real life context. And even though it's like it's common sense and everyone knows that, but I'm surprised if so many people still doing a lot of studies, like studying English. And I mean, like it really depends. Like the next question I will ask them is, what do you mean by studying English? So if by studying English you mean communicating with people, then it's fantastic. I mean, you should be doing that, of course, yeah. If that's what you mean. But if you mean studying English by just doing lessons, exercises, even reciting those phrases or learning vocabulary, I don't think it's productive. I just don't think it will really make you fluent. So I would say
I wouldn't take away from what you just said. I think that that's quite correct. But what I would add is that you have to actually you have to fall in love with the culture.
Yes.
And the content from the culture, like that was written by the originals, you have to like it to a point that it's enjoyable for you.
Yes. I can even make a follow-up comment on your comment. I can say that, like, in my experience, things that I really liked definitely were culture related. Like, for example, I used to like British comedies. They're just amazing. I mean, even if I couldn't understand most of it, but I could still follow some, and like the jokes that I understood were actually really funny. And then I wanted to understand every single joke in that comedy. So yeah, I think I was into British comedies, especially like classic ones, maybe made in the 70s, 80s.
Like Monty Python.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it was really great. And also, yeah, I was watching a few American movies with subtitles, so no Russian, no native language, and that was also helpful. I mean, I used to like some movies, but I would say like the British comedies, I would put them on the first place. I mean, like for cultural experience. And then, yeah, and obviously, I mean, it's not just about culture. It's also about, like, you want to learn how the society operates outside of your country, right? So how people communicate, what kind of people are there, And obviously English, since it's English, so you don't only focus on American or British culture. You actually think, okay, so someone is from France, but you can still communicate with them, right? Someone is from Germany. So I went, before I went to New Zealand, actually, I went to Europe a couple of times. Just for a very short trip. And of course, even at that time, my English was already good enough to communicate compared to other people, for example, in the group, right? But of course, it was not as good as it is now. And it was actually very encouraging because, like, everyone speaks English. I mean, I remember I arrived in Amsterdam early in the morning, and just there was only a few people, but I was surprised. I mean, everyone I see speaks English. I mean, this is Amsterdam, this is Netherlands. I mean, like, we have Dutch, they have other languages, but I mean, everyone speaks English. I was very wow.
Yeah, so, like, you touched a very sensitive part, because I believe that it's easier for Russians. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's easier for Russians to actually travel to Europe than it is for Brazilians to go anywhere where they're going to use their English. The closest is the United States.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I mean, that's a valid point, but I think maybe geographically it's closer, and maybe even like culturally, I would say it's kind of close. But I mean, based on my experience, I mean, most of my Brazilian friends are actually traveling overseas extensively, and lots of young people actually go into Europe these days, and just for like I don't know what is it called, like volunteer experience and all these things. So I would say right now for a young person, I think it's better to be a Brazilian young person because you can just go to Europe and basically spend a few months there if you have at least a little bit of money.
So you're saying there's like the same or maybe more flow of Brazilians to Europe than there is of Russians to Europe?
I'd say yes. I mean, there are many Russians in Europe, but most of them are moving to Europe permanently. So, or they are tourists. They are just like they are not really there for cultural experience. They just see the movie going outside the bus. So we're not communicating with anyone. So yeah. So there are some. But,
they go like with the Russian language behind their arm, and you just travel around.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. No one bothers. Everyone expects local staff to speak English or to speak Russian to them. So absolutely no. I'd say most people who are just traveling from Russia, they still speak no English at all, basically. Just maybe a couple of sentences, couple of words they understand, but that's about it.
Which is another thing. Like, how is the how can I say that? How many? How is the? I don't want to say the percentage because it makes something like any researches on it. But what is like on your close community back in Russia? How long since you left Russia? I think you said it's been more than 5 years,
about
right?
14 years now. Yeah, 14 years.
14 years. And you never came back.
No, I was going back from time to time, but not for a long time. Yes, I spend most time here outside.
Well, this is I'm probably going to edit this out. Do you go to visit your mom?
Yeah. I mean, I visit my parents, but only from time to time. Yeah, it's just I don't go there for like a few months or a few years.
But you go there, you stay a few weeks, as if you were on vacation.
Maybe 1 week or even sometimes less. About 1 week. Yeah.
And you stay at your mom's.
Yeah. I mean, my parents live there.
Do you have brothers or sisters?
No siblings.
You're the only child? I never
that's
asked you
typical.
those things. We know for so long. I never asked you those things.
Yeah. It's typical actually for Russian families at that time. It's kind of typical to raise only one child. It's not like I would say it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon to have like those kind of families. Yeah.
But I asked all that. I got curious. But the real question, the question for for other people's purposes is that in your close community in Russia, how many people speak English, and what are the chances of someone speaking like a Brazilian going to Russia speaking English? How well is he going to get around?
Yeah. I can definitely answer this question. I would say that if that Brazilian person goes only to tourist places, like for example hotels, some attractions, takes for example like flyers from city to city, I think they can easily get by with just English. In fact, there is no expectations from Russians to speak Russian. They don't speak English either, but they can just sort of communicate still. So they speak a little bit of English. Now, in hotels, obviously, I mean, if it's Moscow, I think you can expect local staff in the hotel to speak English. It's pretty given. I mean, like it's almost like, yeah, unless you are staying in a very cheap hotel, maybe they don't. If you are going to a smaller place, like outside of Moscow or St. Petersburg, then of course the chances that you will find a fluent English speaker are very, very low. Very few people would be able to understand what you are saying. So they might, at most, they might understand that you are speaking English. Maybe they will understand that you are from Brazil, but that.
What about in Krasnodar? How are the chances of me stopping at a restaurant?
Yeah.
How are the chances of me stopping at a restaurant and getting a waiter that could speak English with me?
I would say yes, there is a chance. There is a chance, but the chance is very, very low. I would say like 10 to 20% that the waiter will be able to speak English. Yeah. It
Maybe
doesn't.
in a more fancy restaurant, you would say.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't mean that you won't get served. You will get served. It's no problem. It will be an interesting experience. But I don't think that like most people will be able to actually understand. In addition to a few words, maybe they will understand. Like menu, we say menu. It's French word. So few words are similar.
That's good.
But of course, I mean, if you are in Moscow, you will find quite a few people who are able to speak some English. Yeah? But it's not universal. It's like, for example, if you compare with Germany, if you compare with Netherlands, no, it's not. Most people don't speak English.
Much less than those countries, you would say.
A lot less, yeah. Because now I think in Scandinavia, in Netherlands, and increasingly in Germany, it would be almost ridiculous not to be able to speak English. It's like, it just means that you are not educated. You are not.
Yeah, I actually talked to a Dutch guy the other day,
Yeah.
and then he said he said like everybody speaks English in Netherlands. Said everybody, like, what about your grandma? He said my grandma speaks English. I said, what about a lot of the grandmas in the countryside? He said, oh well, some grandmas in the countryside will find that they speak very little English.
Yeah,
Means the farthest you can go to find someone that you cannot speak English, you have to go to a very far side of the country to find an elderly person that actually don't speak English, speak only Dutch.
Then you see, in that case, we're going too far from actual English speaking environment. We don't need to, unless we want to have like a completely different culture. People in the cities can speak English. It's okay, I think. More than enough. But in Russia, it's not the case. Yeah.
No, not at all like that. Russia, not at all like that.
Yeah, it's a case-on-case basis. I mean, some people like suddenly will be able to understand what you're saying, but most of them are not. In fact, I actually know quite a few Russians. It's a very interesting point, but I know quite a few Russians who live overseas and they speak like a local language, like, for example, Japanese language they speak, right? But they don't speak English at all. So like actually their second language becomes Japanese, or like, I don't know, maybe German, could be even Portuguese under some circumstances, but not English. So, which is kind of, for me, it's strange because usually I see people whose second language is English. Yeah.
Would you say that the native language Russian offers any difficulty for an English learner?
Well, yes and no. If you are a speaker of English, whether native or non-native, and you're trying to learn Russian, again, the same advice applies. If you start learning Russian by communicating with people in Russian, or like getting some real life input, you will be able to get to a very decent level in just a few months. It's just a matter of like practice, time. It doesn't take that long. It's if you are into it, if you actually make it like a daily practice, real life practice, I don't think you will have much problems with getting to fluency level. So maybe in about a year or two, but you have to use that language every day. So I guess it's the same with English. Of course, I mean, if you look at grammar is actually complicated. Grammar is really complicated because you have to learn all these like cases. If you ask me, I don't remember those cases myself. I use them, but I don't remember the names of cases. And if you start with grammar, you will give up. I can almost 100% guarantee that unless your focus is grammar. So in that case, maybe you will persist and you will get to some level. But starting to learn conversation with grammar, it's impossible, because native speakers, they never actually learn their language from grammar. I remember myself when I was in high school, let's say elementary school. So we had the first lesson of Russian language, right? And our lesson of Russian language was actually very, very extensive. And we used to have books and we used to have exercises every day and we used to write a lot. But at that time, when someone says that, so that's how you learned Russian. No, not at all. I learned Russian before that. I learned Russian before I opened the first grammar book. I had no idea about grammar. I didn't know how to say this in the grammar.
Yeah, I think the same here. Like when kids go to school, they have these. They teach the alphabet,
Yeah.
and they teach the letters and how they sound together. So it's the famous B mais A dá bairro. B plus A equals Ba. But the idea that you learn to say Ba because your teacher told you that B plus A is Ba, it's preposterous.
Redundant almost. Exactly.
That's right. I think we have good material here, no?
Yeah. I mean, we could stop. We could just make my interview only, and we can record next time. We can record your experiences of learning English. I mean, this could be cool. Yeah.
Good.